Ever wonder what price and pay for glory? Is fame worth dying for? Number 7. Donald Campbell water speed record tragedy. Donald Campbell lived in the shadow of his father, Sir Malcolm Campbell, who had set both land and water speed records in the 1920s and 1930s. The Campbell name was synonymous with speed, and Donald was determined to uphold the family legacy. By the 1960s, Donald had already broken 7 world water speed records and was the first person to set both land and water speed records in the same year. On January 4, 1967, Campbell was attempting to break his own water speed record on Coniston Water in the English Lake District. His jet-powered boat, the Bluebird K7, had already made a successful run at over 300 mph. Rather than waiting for the water to calm as originally planned, Campbell immediately turned around for a second run. As Bluebird reached approximately 328 mph, the boat suddenly lifted from the water, somersaulted, and disintegrated upon impact. The accident was captured on film and witnessed by hundreds of onlookers who had gathered to watch history being made. Instead, they witnessed tragedy. Campbell's last words over the radio were hauntingly calm. "I'm getting a lot of bloody row in here. I can't see anything. I've got the bows out. I'm going." His body wasn't recovered until 2001, when divers finally located the wreckage of Bluebird. Campbell was still wearing his blue racing suit and helmet when they found him. What made Campbell's death particularly poignant was how close he had come to survival. Analysis of the accident showed that if he had waited for the water to settle, as originally planned, the accident might never have happened. His impatience and determination to break the record cost him his life. Campbell's daughter later said that her father knew the risks but believed that to live without danger was not to live at all. Number 6. Jessi Combs, the fastest woman on 4 wheels. Jessi Combs was a Renaissance woman in the world of motorsports, a professional racer, television host, metal fabricator, and a role model for women in male-dominated industries. With her blonde hair and infectious smile, she broke stereotypes as readily as she broke speed records. On August 27, 2019, Combs was piloting the North American Eagle, a repurposed F-104 jet fitted with wheels, across the Alvord Desert in Oregon. She was attempting to break her own land speed record of 398 mph, which had already earned her the title of fastest woman on 4 wheels. The sleek vehicle tore across the desert at unimaginable speeds, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. During her run, something went catastrophically wrong. A mechanical failure in the front wheel assembly caused the vehicle to crash at high speed. Combs was declared dead at the scene. She was just 39 years old. Posthumously, Guinness World Records recognized Combs for setting a new women's land speed record of 522.783 mph. The record was calculated based on data recovered from her final runs. Combs had achieved her goal, but at the ultimate price. Before her fatal attempt, Combs had posted on social media, "It may seem a little crazy to walk directly into the line of fire. Those who are willing are those who achieve great things. People say I'm crazy. I say thank you." Her death sent shockwaves through the racing community, with tributes pouring in from fellow racers, fans, and the many viewers who had watched her on shows like Mythbusters and Overhaulin'. Number 5. Frank Lockhart, the Daytona Beach disaster. Frank Lockhart was a racing prodigy. In the 1920s, when automobile racing was still in its dangerous infancy, Lockhart emerged as one of America's greatest talents. He won the Indianapolis 500 as a rookie in 1926 and quickly established himself as the man to beat on the American racing scene. Lockhart wasn't content with circuit racing. He wanted to be the fastest man on Earth. In 1928, at just 25 years old, he took his specially designed Stutz Blackhawk Special to the hard-packed sands of Daytona Beach, Florida. The streamlined car was a technological marvel, featuring a supercharged engine that could produce extraordinary power for its time. On April 25, 1928, Lockhart made his attempt on the land speed record. The Stutz streaked across the sand at over 200 mph when disaster struck. A rear tire blew out, causing the car to skid wildly. The vehicle flipped multiple times before throwing Lockhart out onto the beach. He died almost instantly, his promising career and bright future extinguished in seconds. What made Lockhart's death particularly tragic was that it wasn't his first crash at Daytona. Just 2 months earlier, he had survived when his car flipped into the Atlantic Ocean. Instead of being deterred, Lockhart had the car rebuilt and returned, showing the determination that made him a champion but ultimately led to his demise. Newspapers across America mourned the loss of the young star. The New York Times called him the most brilliant driver that America has yet produced. Racing historian Griffith Borgeson would later write, "Frank Lockhart was a meteor that flashed briefly across the racing sky." Number 4. Pyotr Dolgov, the spacesuit test that went wrong. During the height of the Cold War and the space race between the United States and Soviet Union, test pilots on both sides pushed the boundaries of altitude and endurance. One such pioneer was Colonel Pyotr Dolgov, a Soviet test pilot and parachutist who specialized in high-altitude jumps. On November 1, 1962, Dolgov was participating in a test of the Soviet Vostok spacecraft's ejection systems. The mission, codenamed Volga, involved taking a pressurized gondola attached to a stratospheric balloon to an altitude of 93,970 feet, about 28.6 kilometers, at the edge of space. From there, Dolgov and his fellow test pilot Eugene Andreev would jump, testing new spacesuits and parachute systems intended for cosmonauts. Andreev jumped first and made it safely to the ground, setting a world record for the longest freefall. Dolgov's jump, however, ended in tragedy. As he exited the gondola, his pressure suit struck the edge of the door and tore. At that extreme altitude, where atmospheric pressure is less than 1% of that at sea level, his suit explosively decompressed. Dolgov lost consciousness almost immediately and died before reaching the ground. What makes this story particularly poignant is that, due to the secrecy surrounding the Soviet space program, Dolgov's death was not publicly acknowledged for many years. While American test pilots who died were often publicly mourned as heroes, Dolgov's sacrifice remained largely unknown outside of classified military circles. His contribution to space exploration was immense. The data from these high-altitude tests helped develop the spacesuits that would later protect cosmonauts in space. The Soviet Union initially claimed Dolgov had set a parachuting record, hiding the fact that he had died. It wasn't until the fall of the Soviet Union that the full story emerged. In a final twist of irony, because of the classified nature of his mission, Dolgov's altitude record was never officially recognized, though he had indeed reached a height that few humans had at that time. Number 3. Karl Wallenda, the king of the high wire. Karl Wallenda was born into a circus family in Germany in 1905, and by the time he was a teenager, he had developed his own act, a high wire performance without a safety net. He founded the Flying Wallendas, who became famous for their 7-person pyramid performed on the high wire. Their name became synonymous with daring, skill, and tragedy. The Wallenda family suffered multiple fatal accidents through the years, but Karl persevered, continuing to perform well into his 70s. Age did not diminish his courage or his need to push boundaries. In 1978, at 73 years old, Wallenda attempted to walk between the towers of the 10-story Condado Plaza Hotel in San Juan, Puerto Rico, on a wire stretched 121 feet above the ground. The day was windy, and the wire had been improperly secured. Eyewitnesses reported seeing Wallenda struggle to maintain his balance as gusts of wind hit him. Suddenly he fell, plummeting to the pavement below. The tragedy was caught on camera by news crews who had gathered to document what Wallenda had hoped would be another triumph in his legendary career. What makes Wallenda's story particularly compelling is how he viewed risk. Years before his fatal fall, he had famously said, "Life is on the wire, everything else is just waiting." He lived by those words until the very end. His great-grandson, Nick Wallenda, continues the family tradition of daredevil high-wire acts, including crossings of Niagara Falls and the Grand Canyon. Karl Wallenda's death brought into focus the eternal question that haunts all daredevils and record breakers: is it worth it? For Karl, the answer seemed clear. He once told a reporter, "I've walked the wire for 50 years, it's my life. What am I going to do? Sit in a rocking chair and wait to die?" Number 2. Otto Lilienthal, the Glider King. Before the Wright brothers took their famous flight at Kitty Hawk, there was Otto Lilienthal, the German aviation pioneer who was the first person to make well-documented, repeated, successful gliding flights. Known as the Glider King, Lilienthal conducted over 2,000 flights in his self-designed gliders, some covering distances of over 1,000 feet. Lilienthal's work was revolutionary. Rather than approaching flight purely as a mechanical problem, he studied birds and published a book called Bird Flight as the Basis of Aviation. He understood that mastering the principles of lift and control were essential before adding power to an aircraft. His gliders were based on the wing shapes of storks, and he controlled them by shifting his body weight, a principle still used in hang gliders today. On August 9, 1896, Lilienthal was gliding from the Gallenberg Hill near Berlin when his glider suddenly pitched forward, causing him to lose control. He fell from a height of about 50 feet and broke his spine. As he lay dying the next day, his last words were reported to be, "Sacrifices must be made." Lilienthal's death was a setback for aviation, but also a catalyst. The Wright brothers closely followed his work and learned from both his successes and his fatal accident. Wilbur Wright later wrote, "Of all the men who attacked the flying problem in the 19th century, Otto Lilienthal was easily the most important." Lilienthal's understanding that aircraft needed to be controllable, not just capable of generating lift, was a crucial insight that influenced all subsequent aircraft design. What's particularly poignant about Lilienthal's story is that he was fully aware of the risks he was taking. In a letter to a colleague, he once wrote, "To invent an airplane is nothing, to build one is something, but to fly is everything." He knew that pioneers often pay with their lives, but believed the advancement of human flight was worth the risk. Number 1. Rob Korhonen, the free diving pioneer. Rob Korhonen had always been drawn to the ocean's depths. As a child growing up in coastal Florida, he would hold his breath and dive to the bottom of swimming pools to retrieve coins. By his 20s, he had discovered the sport of free diving, descending to great depths on a single breath of air, without scuba equipment. Free diving is perhaps one of the most dangerous record-setting activities. The pressure at depth compresses the lungs and can cause blackouts if a diver stays down too long. Yet the allure of pushing human limits draws many to the sport. In 2004, Korhonen was attempting to break the American free diving record by descending to 225 feet on a single breath. He had trained for months, gradually increasing his lung capacity and teaching his body to function with minimal oxygen. On the day of his attempt, conditions seemed perfect: clear blue water off the coast of the Cayman Islands, minimal current, and excellent visibility. Korhonen descended smoothly, following a guide rope into the depths. Watchers on the surface monitored his progress via camera attached to a safety diver. He reached his target depth and grabbed a tag as proof, then began his ascent. It was during the return to the surface that tragedy struck. At approximately 100 feet, Korhonen showed signs of distress. Freedivers call it a shallow water blackout, a loss of consciousness caused by oxygen deprivation that often occurs paradoxically as pressure decreases and oxygen expands in the lungs. Safety divers rushed to bring him to the surface, but by the time they reached him, Korhonen had suffered severe brain damage from lack of oxygen. He died 3 days later in a hospital, never having regained consciousness. What makes Korhonen's story particularly tragic is that he had actually achieved his goal. The tag retrieved from the bottom confirmed he had reached his target depth and would have set a new American record. His final achievement was recognized posthumously, bringing little comfort to his family and friends. The free diving community responded by implementing stricter safety protocols, including more safety divers and better monitoring equipment. Yet the sport remains inherently dangerous, with the lure of deeper depths continuing to call to those who, like Korhonen, seek to discover the limits of human capability. Is breaking a record worth the ultimate sacrifice? How many more will lose their lives chasing that moment of glory?